So here we are once again at the continuing on the round. We're knit the stitches on needle 1, and we're at the double stitch or the double needle, where we have stitches from needle 2, a stitch marker, stitches from needle 3, and then the stitches from needle 4 on the back. When I was learning to knit, I don't think bamboos existed. I'm sure though other needles existed besides the ones I ended up buying, and the ones I ended up buying were the most commonly available, cheapest needles because I was poor. And I learned to knit on metal, and I still like knitting on metal, though I know many people like knitting on bamboo. One of the problems with bamboo, though not particularly with this size, which is size US 7 or 4.5 millimeters, is they're more fragile and they do tend to break. And there's many a knitter who's been knitting and broken one needle and switched from knitting on a set of 5 to on a set of 4, and then had a second problem and dropped a needle or broke another needle, and now has left with 3 needles and no way to proceed. Well, one way to proceed, and one modern way to knit in the round, is to use circular needles. A circular needle, when you think about it, is a double-pointed needle. There are the 2 points. The difference is it's gone soft in the middle. It has a flexible middle. This one's not the most flexible needle, but I don't mind because I learned to knit on circular needles that had metal cables and were extremely rigid. So anything that's not metal is flexible to me. So what we can do is we can pick up our knitting, and instead of using a double-pointed needle, we can substitute a circular double-pointed needle. I'm going to just move things around and just knit our stitches onto a double-pointed needle, onto a circular needle, instead of onto a double-pointed needle, and things will work just fine. Now, one of the things about double-pointed needles is you have to have some space, and you can see the space, the opening, so it's easy for me to knit, because if I didn't have this space, if my stitches were jammed up and immovable and next to this needle back here, which I'm trying to hold close to it, and it's almost impossible to do, it would be very difficult for me to maneuver the stitches. Creating this opening in the knitting makes it very, very easy for me to access the stitches, to knit. The needles fall in effect, especially now, so I'm getting a few more rows on them. Here's our marker. We're just going to slip it. I sometimes, especially in the beginning, will pull the yarn to the front, slip, pull the yarn to the back. That, as I say, helps weave that marker in, so if it falls off the needle, it won't get lost, and you won't have to go looking for it. If you do accidentally knit into it, as I say, you can cut the top loop of the thing. This double-pointed needle is coming into view, and I'm just ignoring it as I knit. Some people like to put it to the back. I don't really make much ado of it. So we now have a spare needle. So what we can do is we can take this spare needle and we continue knitting. Oh dear. Now this is one of the things that happens sometimes. As you're moving from needle to needle, you grab the wrong needle. I know people who go panicky. It's much easier to do this with needles. One of the things I like to point out to people is knitting tight is counterproductive. And the reason is, when you knit tight, your stitches are so glad to be off the needle that they will tend to jump and run. When you knit at an even tension, and I tend to knit at an even tension over years, then the stitches just sit there. They just sit there. They're not going anywhere. And picking stitches back up is really not that hard. There we go, the last one. Just pick them back up. So that's an accident that happens, and I find the less you panic, the easier it is to deal with it right away. Don't put your knitting down with your stitches loose. Okay, so that's done. We're going to just continue coming back around to that circular needle. So we have the spare needle now. We have 3 double-pointed needles and 1 circular needle, a different kind of double-pointed needle. When you think about it, it's still a double-pointed needle. And let's not repeat the mistake. And we'll knit needle 2. We know this is needle 2 because our marker, which is the tail, is right there. I use the tail as a marker for a very long time. I just think that it's easiest to do. It's very easy to do, especially with double-pointed needles where it's not ambiguous where the division is. Okay, so now I've come here and I have my spare. I'm going to tuck my spare into the work just to get it out of the way. I'm going to crank, turn to the right, just a quarter turn, and now I'm going to take my double-pointed needle and I'm going to move the stitches to the other end of it, so it's at the other end of the needle, and then I'm going to take the other end of the double-pointed needle and I'm going to start knitting. And this is really one of the ways that you can knit in the round with a circular needle. You just knit from the needle to the needle, and it's going to feel almost like you're knitting flat. It really changes the feeling of the work, but it becomes very easy to do. So you can always substitute one circular needle for 1 or 2 double-pointed needles. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. And there we go. Knitting on the round, in the round, using a circular needle, and you can put it as... Now, seeing that, you can easily see, I'm not going to do it right this second, I'll do the new video in a few days or so. You can see how you could substitute a second double-pointed needle for these 2 needles. You could do, once again, put a marker between the 2, cast them onto using a circular needle, knit them onto needle, place a marker and knit them onto the needle, and you would have knitting in the round using 2 double-pointed needles. I am going to demonstrate that, and I am going to demonstrate using magic loop in the round. So this is one way to continue knitting if you break a needle, or to change to knitting things on circulars. Because of my cold, I'm stopping now.